More of Ladies Can We Talk with Debbie Georgatos, right here on 660 AM The Answer.
Hello, welcome back to Ladies Can We Talk. We have on the line tonight Rick Green. He is a Texan who is running for Texas Supreme Court in Place 5. Hi, Rick.
Hey, Debbie. Thanks for having me. Glad to be with you.
Glad to have you, sir. Well, you know, this election season is early voting is over. We have obviously Super Tuesday is this coming Tuesday, and if you haven't voted yet, you can vote in your primary in Texas and vote. And among the many things on the ballot have to do with some of the seats on the Texas Supreme Court. So, Rick, I want to jump right in and ask you something. A lot of people saw after Justice Scalia passed on and unexpectedly that there was quite a battle over who would nominate and then obviously choose the person who'd be on the bench to take Justice Scalia's place. And I think people see on the national level, well, you know, there's so many big issues. They're political. They have political overtones, and the liberals are very obvious in the court and the conservatives. Is that also true in Texas? Is there that strain in the court, whether we have a liberal versus conservative tension going on?
It's not quite. It's definitely not as bad as at the federal level. But there's definitely a split at the state level. I would say, you know, you've got 9 Republicans on the court, but you definitely have a difference in legal philosophy, and that difference really is probably best explained or described even in an exchange my opponent and I had at one of our debates. In that, when the marriage question came up, his opinion was it's settled law. The Supreme Court is, he said, the supreme law of the land, and therefore it's over. I completely disagree with that. The Founding Fathers would disagree with that and say that Article 6, the Supremacy Clause, says that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land and that the Supreme Court does not have the final say. The other branches have plenty of opportunity to push back, and the other levels of government. The states have an opportunity to push back as well. So there's definitely a difference in philosophy in terms of this sort of legal elite establishment that believes that judges are essentially the high priest of the law. And then there are those of us that don't believe that. We believe the Constitution is the final say, and that comes from we the people. And therefore, if we will pay more attention to these judicial issues, we can get the court put back in its proper box. And that's why I'm running. I'm a big believer in separation of powers and making sure that the court only does what it was intended to do, that we keep it within the jurisdictional lines that we the people drew for it, and stop allowing them to make law for the state or for the country.
We're speaking tonight with Rick Green, who is running for Texas Supreme Court Place 5, and actually you are challenging an incumbent who is sitting on the court in the primary. If you haven't voted yet, the primary is this coming Tuesday. So what would you describe? That was a great example, the issue of marriage and whether you just defer to the Supreme Court's recent case or not. What other kinds of issues do you feel like you'd be different from your opponent or from the person you're challenging in issues before the court?
Well, that's a great indication of someone's instincts with regard to religious liberty and other constitutional rights, and that's why I got drafted to run. When the marriage case came down last summer, frankly, the whole summer was a debacle at the courts, both at the federal level and the state level. You know, of course, we had Obamacare and the federal marriage decision just back-to-back days, and then the week before that, we had a state marriage case where the incumbent decided to ignore our Texas Constitution regarding marriage being one man and one woman and acknowledge a homosexual divorce, and frankly do it outside the jurisdictional lines that we the people drew in our Constitution. And we told the court they could not do that, but they did it anyway. That's not the only issue. There are other issues. There's a property rights case where, he has said that it's okay for a homeowner association or a city to come and tell you that even though they approved your plans, that now that they found out your plans overstep some regulation that they have, they can, force you to tear down whatever you've built. I mean, those are basic constitutional issues of property rights, parental rights, everything from marriage and life and Sharia law. These are all big issues that are at the state court level all over the country. We're seeing it happen in other state Supreme Courts across the country where parents are being told they can't homeschool, where abortion and life are being decided by the judges instead of by the legislators who were supposed to have making the law. And so I want to be in a position to defend our Constitution, defend the basic religious liberty rights of all Texans, and make sure that we're not allowing these judges to overstep the boundaries that they have. And the good news is we had, when that marriage case came down last summer, there were 3 rock-solid conservatives on the court that said that's wrong. We should not be tying the Attorney General's hands and preventing him from defending our Constitution. I'm looking forward to standing with those guys and gals and bringing back a strong conservative majority to this Texas Supreme Court that will defend our Constitution.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit, you're obviously an attorney, a little bit about your background, the practice of law?
Yeah, in fact, it's kind of funny. If you listen to the ads out there, you would think I wasn't even an attorney. I've been practicing law for a little over 18 years. I went to University of Texas Law School and did my undergrad out at Angelo State. I do transactional work. I'm not a trial lawyer, it's true, and I'm not a sitting judge. Half of our Texas Supreme Court justices in history were not judges before they served on the Supreme Court. It's actually a good thing to have different experiences represented in that room. When that door's shut and those 9 justices are debating these issues, rather than them all coming from, kind of cut from the same cloth, coming from the exact same backgrounds, it's great to have, people from different backgrounds. And I'm bringing some things to the court that, frankly, have been missing for a few years. One is the fact that I'm a former legislator. I served 2 terms in the Texas House, served on the Criminal Jurisprudence Committee. I passed the only tort reform bill while I was there in the legislature. In fact, it was Stopping Cities from Suing Gun Manufacturers, number 1 bill of the NRA and Gun Owners of America. In fact, Charlton Heston, after that legislation was passed, came and did an ad in Texas for me back then that he said, Rick Green's a patriot you can trust. Join me in supporting Rick Green. So not only Charlton Heston has supported me in the past, but in this race, folks like Chuck Norris and David Barton and Dr. James Dobson and Kirk Cameron and great legal minds out there like Kelly Shackelford and Matt Staver and Mike Ferris and Judge Paul Pressler and all of these conservative leaders. We've got over 100 conservative leaders and groups out there that have endorsed me over this 20-year incumbent specifically because of having the right judicial philosophy. And mainly it's the constitutional experience that I'm bringing to the table. It's not just being a lawyer, and I've been an arbitrator, a mediator, and been with big firms and small firms. I love my slow practice because I get more time with my family. But all of that's kind of, small compared to, and frankly, everybody in the race has the legal experience necessary. But what's important is the constitutional experience that I bring to the table. I've been teaching on the Constitution for 15 years all over the country, had 20,000 people go through my class. I've been learning at the feet of David Barton for almost, 16 years now. I think the preeminent historian in the country certainly has the best resources. We have the largest private collection of Founding Fathers documents in the country, so we had actually go to the original intent of the founders when we're looking at these constitutional issues. So you throw all that in the mix, and that's why you have all these conservative leaders saying, man, that's what we need. We need Rick Green's experience on the Supreme Court right now. This isn't about some nuanced procedural issue. This is about basic constitutional rights and having someone that's battle-tested that will stand firm on those things and defend these things for the future of our kids.
Okay, we're speaking, if you've just tuned in, we're speaking with Rick Green, who is a candidate for the Texas Supreme Court, place 5, and you're almost out of time to vote. This coming Tuesday, March 1st, is our primary voting day if you haven't voted yet. And so it happens the person who's challenging the incumbent also has the last name Green, but the gentleman we're speaking to is Rick Green. And, I did notice, I did some research after first connecting with you about all the conservative endorsements you have, which is kind of interesting because often people are reticent to challenge an incumbent sitting justice, especially in a high court like the Texas Supreme Court, unless there's a really compelling reason. So I think that people, the conservatives, and it's not just social issue conservatives, as you say, it's property rights, it's the constitutional conservatism, feel it's important enough to challenge this incumbent to support you. So I commend you. Sounds like you're running bring a lot to the table for this court. We're going to wrap up here in this segment, but can you tell our listeners how to find more about you and where to go to on the internet to find your website?
You bet. Thanks, Debbie. And you're exactly right. Those endorsements are unusual when running against an incumbent, and it's for exactly the reason you just stated. But the website is rickgreen.com, and click on the campaign site there, and you can see all the endorsements. You can learn a little bit more about me and my background and my family and my beliefs and my judicial philosophy. And I would just share one of those endorsements from Phyllis Schlafly. She said, candidates in judicial elections deserve an extra layer of scrutiny. Too often, judicial supremacists have rewritten our laws and forced unwanted policies on the public. So she said Rick Green's a stellar candidate for the Supreme Court. He values our constitutional system and the proper role of the judiciary. So that's exactly the kind of motivation that these endorsers have, is that, look, we're at the precipice. We have got to restore our constitutional limits and jurisdictions, and Rick Green's the guy that will help do that. So pick Rick. Don't be confused by the 2 candidates named Green. Pick Rick if you want to restore separation of powers.
Thank you. We're speaking with Rick Green. Thank you so much for calling in tonight, sir. And I will also commend to our listeners the Facebook page, Rick Green. I guess it's just Rick Green for Supreme Court. Very good, full of all the endorsements. Encourage everyone to go there, too.
Debbie, thank you so much. There's some great videos on there as well, some good educational stuff. We do these things called constitutional minutes, just 1 or 2 minutes on really important issues in the Constitution to help people learn about things that are happening right now and the challenges they can do something about. God bless you. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for calling. And this is Debbie Georgatos. And ladies, can we talk?